Good afternoon. Please welcome to the stage the Vice President of Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth, Sandy Fernández, and our panelists.
Good, we got a water here. The bright light.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's really good to see all of you. Thank you for all sticking around until Friday for the final lunch plenary. We're going to be really exciting because this is a topic that I'm really passionate about, which is around infrastructure, particularly around CDFI infrastructure. Again, I'm Sandy Fernández. I'm with the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth. I lead work around social impact, and one of the programs I lead is called Strive USA. That program is focused on making investments through philanthropic capital, but also in-kind expertise and other types of services that MasterCard offers to really focus on building up the infrastructure and the network capacity of CDFIs. And we've been doing that for the last couple of years. I've been in the sector for about 20 years. Prior to this, I was at Citi and JP Morgan. And I'm really excited to be joined here by my esteemed colleagues here and leaders in the field. I'll start over at the far left, Donna Gambrell, who's the CEO, as you all well know, of Appalachian Community Capital, followed by Mark DiGiovanni, who heads up ATX Advisory Services, and lastly, but not least, Cary Cooper, who heads up Lenders Cooperative, and who've had the pleasure to get to know more so recently, and does really exciting work. So, this forum, it was really interesting when we first started, and the mayor was sharing all the work that they've been doing here in the city of Austin and the innovation that they do. And he shared some really interesting examples on how they've been able to really rapidly change the way they deliver services, the way they do some assessments from like 90 days to 30 days to 20 days. It's really, really fascinating insights in how they've been actually implementing their own innovation around the work. And that thematic has been throughout the entire conference here, and it's been really wonderful to see. I had an opportunity earlier today to participate in a conversation with Amber Bell and her team and folks who are leading up the innovation initiative here at OFN, and it really means a lot for the sector because the conversation is really how do we prep the sector for the 21st century? There's tremendous pressures that the industry is facing now. It's going to continue to face in the future, and it really is a significant opportunity to evolve and adapt and to change. And when we talk about innovation, we always think about technology, and that is a critical component of innovation and something that I'm very vested in supporting and growing, and all the new types of technology, AI and other tools as well. But it's also about things that are not necessarily technology driven. Things like collaboration, how do you incentivize that? How do you learn from each other as well? So it takes many shapes and forms when we talk about innovation. So we're going to be talking about that today. And with that, I'm going to start off the set of questions. So when you all think about infrastructure challenges that CDFIs are facing today, what's top of mind for you? We can start with you, Cary.
Yeah, no, I think the challenge that's been across the industry, and not only the CDFI industry, but the entire depository, the banking, the credit union, the systems that they have been able to access 5 years ago, they had to sort of purchase in pieces. So think origination technology, servicing technology, payments. Then you think about to originate a loan, there's 15 different third-party integrations that you have to establish. So I think the challenges that we've seen that we've been able to sort of help overcome is we have origination and servicing and payments in one single platform. And back in 2017 when we started building, and Mark will speak a little bit about his company, and really our company was very similar for the first 10 years. We provided sort of advisory services. It really acted like an outsourced IT department for clients. So we didn't really have a product, and through that 10-year journey, what we saw is that someone needs to go and bring all of this together in one single system. But the challenges I see is buying workflow tools that then require tech admins to do integrations with those required 13 to 15 third-party vendors. And one thing I've definitely learned over the last 5 years is not only establishing those integrations is costly and challenging, but more so even maintaining each one of those integrations going forward. So when you have those integration and there's release and updates, things break. And so do you have a third-party partner that's establishing and helping you keep those integrations working and intact. So I think as we get through today, we can talk about, too, how much technology's changed in the last 5 years, the different options today. We'll talk a little bit about, AI is a big marketing word, buzzword, throw it around. It's evolved so much even in the last 6 months. So the opportunity, I think, for CDFIs is to reassess where is technology today, where is origination, servicing, payments, integrations, what does that look like going forward? Because what's available today wasn't available 5 years ago, and things are changing in a rapid pace. So it really is just getting awareness and knowledge to the industry, what is available. So.
Great, thanks. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark DiGiovanni, Managing Partner and Founder of ATX Advisory Services. As Cary mentioned, we're a technology advisory services firm. So we have a lot of experience working with organizations, so we get to see the challenges that they have that they're trying to solve. We do take a very customized approach because people are using different platforms and have different challenges and different needs. So through that, I think we gain a lot of insight working with our CDFI clients. I personally have been consulting around technology for 25 years. I've spent the last 10 years focused really as our social impact lead, which includes our work with CDFIs. I'm personally passionate about kind of technology transformation, so certainly honored to sit on this panel today. So contrary to what many people think, like our name ATX is in no way associated with Austin, Texas. Definitely got that question quite a bit this week. It's actually analytics, technology, and executive advisory services. But anytime I come to Austin, I always get a chance to find some really good customized swag that I can bring back to the team. So on a recent trip, I found a shirt, and I kind of took a picture of it, and it said ATX, where weird things happen. So that is on our bulletin board at our office, so I think that's what our team thinks when they come into the office. But it was really good yesterday to listen to the mayor talk about that balance between kind of keeping Austin weird, but also trying to find opportunities for efficiency. And I can absolutely relate that to, I think, our work with our CDFI clients. I think we've definitely seen a lot of weird things that you wouldn't build it that way if you tried to plan it in advance, but it works. But there's certainly lots of opportunities for efficiency and improvement. So the weird's really not surprising. CDFIs are entrepreneurial, offer flexible solutions for their customers. There's a broad kind of set of lending programs that we often see, but there's also cobbled together like technology and very limited resources. But we certainly see opportunities for innovation. That doesn't mean it needs to stay that way. There's a lot of manual processes. There's lack of integrations. There's a lot of older technology. Right? There's people trying to figure out how to better integrate those systems. And there's also generally, we'd say a lack of standards on best practices in many different areas. So when I think about infrastructure and technology, we don't believe that there's a single magic bullet to this. It's really about aligning people, process, and technology. But I think from an industry perspective, we see opportunities for standards, collaboration, shared services, best practices. So I'm really excited to explore those topics on the panel here.
Thank you. Sandy, thank you for the question, and it's good to see everybody on this very last day of the conference. Happy to be here as well. So it's a great question because I think as we think even in the industry, I listened to Harold Pettigrew the first day during the opening plenary talk about headwinds that the industry is facing. And so and you all know because you lead CDFIs that those headwinds are like spinning plates 10 spinning plates in the air at the same time while you're also thinking about my infrastructure. How do I become more efficient? How do I actually increase my effectiveness as an organization? And so for me, it really is at top of mind, Sandy. Technology is, I think, an important part of the CDFI's ecosystem that clearly needs even greater attention. And I sound like a broken record, I know, because I've been talking about this even since I was the director of the CDFI fund, where I certainly saw that there was great intention on the part of CDFIs to really look at ways in which they could enhance their technology, but we're struggling, frankly. And that technology has a lot of tentacles. It's tied to lack of capacity sometimes, a lack of resources, a lack of expertise. All of that kind of falls into one, one big ball of, challenges, I think, for a lot of CDFIs in the industry. Funny story, so I spent a number of years at the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and for those of you who have worked with regulated institutions, you know that it's pretty highly structured. The operations are, there's great order. You push a button and you get call reports. So you have all the information that you need about a bank's operations. And so when I came to Appalachian Community Capital, I asked someone, so where's that button? Because I'm trying to find information about all the small businesses in this 13-state Appalachian region and where the gaps are and what the great needs are. And they said, Donna, there is no button, number one. And you might find a lot of that data, but it's going to be in different places. So, and I'll talk about this a little later, but I think it was really important for Appalachian Community Capital to say, well, what can be done? What can we design? What can we build that will not only help ACC better understand what small business needs are and what the needs of our organizations, our members are, but how can we make sure that it's going to be a successful implementation of technology? And so we'll talk a little bit about that, but I think we are well on our way to actually implementing something that's going to be beneficial not only for the organization, but for the industry as well.
Fantastic. I love all the comments, and Mark, I love that how you said it, the context here for Austin and it being a weird place as well, and also you having seen CDFIs take weird approaches, and so that really speaks to the creativity and the resiliency and the innovation that's in this room already. That's a core part of the DNA of CDFIs, is how do you serve under-resourced communities when you yourself are also under-resourced. And part of that is going to lead into this next set of questions that I have for all of you around like what's broken and also what's possible as well, and what does like the possibility in the future look like. So Mark, I'm going to start with you. In your advisory capacity, you advise a lot of CDFIs as they try to modernize their internal systems. What are the most common bottlenecks that you see, and also what are the breakthroughs that you've seen as well?
Yeah, it's a great question and a great follow-up to really one of Donna's comments there about, we find that one of the biggest bottlenecks is unlocking all of this data that organizations already have. They know it exists within the enterprise. It's in systems, it's in documents, or maybe they're pulling some external data sets together. But it's a heavily, manual process for organizations, and it really provides a lot of value, though. So I think yesterday someone from Wells Fargo was on the panel, and they spoke about how a strong CDFI has really good metrics regardless of the size. So this isn't really just about larger CDFIs or smaller CDFIs. It's about understanding your data, being able to measure things, being able to track it. And I think for years, data has kind of been neglected because with limited budgets, people have been putting in place systems and finding technology systems that help just get the processing done. But there wasn't as much focus on data standards, data aggregation, and that's certainly more of a breakthrough that we're seeing. We're seeing more CDFIs kind of look at their data strategy in addition to their overall software and technology strategy. So figure out what are the tools required, so what's the technology, people putting in place data warehouses, people adopting BI platforms and solutions. But there's also the people and process side of this. So I think on the people side, we see more and more data and impact managers. And like from a process perspective, we're seeing people like focus on data governance and having standards and better defining their metrics and measures. So I see a lot of opportunity there, and I think there's a lot of value in this information, and organizations are really starting to figure out how to harness that. We also see data as a precursor to AI. So we see lots of opportunities there with AI, but we think really organizations should focus on having centralized access to their data where it's secure and it's well understood by the organization before you're starting to layer AI tools on top of that.
Great. Donna, let's go to you. With leading ACC, it's a regional intermediary, has a significant network of CDFIs across the Appalachian region. You've done some really interesting work, and you're already getting some results from all the data work that you're working on, which I know firsthand because we invest in the work that you're doing. But can you speak to what's one infrastructure barrier that gets in the way of CDFIs doing their best work, and what's one that they've actually overcome as well, and how?
So I'm not a technocrat, as probably a lot of people may know. If anytime I'm asking where the one button is, you probably say she probably doesn't know a lot about data. But I can tell you that certainly even hearing from our CDFI members and really just even observing them. So we have an initiative called Resilience Appalachia Data Initiative that is being supported by Mastercard. Thank you, Sandy. We actually, that's a continuum of a data analytics project that we started about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, really with a small cohort of CDFIs in Western North Carolina. And it's progressed to this Resilient Appalachian Data Initiative. And I think the barrier still for many of us, or maybe just some of us in the room, but certainly for me, is really just saying, looking at that data and not being afraid to embrace the data. And so people say, well, I really just don't have time. I don't have the capacity. I don't have the staff. I don't have the knowledge. Folks are talking way up here in a language that is hard for me to grasp. And it's that fear, I think, of moving forward and saying, let me see how I can embrace the technology, but not only embrace it, actually use the technology in my day-to-day work so that it actually benefits the work that I'm doing, that I see better results. Certainly the data analytics project that we're working on, the whole intent is to increase outreach to small businesses and have that outreach be one where business lenders within CDFIs can say, I not only have better data on where those small businesses are that we may not be reaching in a way that we probably thought we could or anticipated that we would, but we also have that outreach that will result in us increasing our lending capacity, making more loans, making better loans, and really diversifying our portfolio, our small business portfolio even more.
Great. So don't be afraid of the data. I love that. Yeah. Cary, with your work at Lenders Cooperative, your organization does a lot in terms of being able to streamline operations and services across the board and have amazing integrations with other technology providers as well. From your vantage point, what's been the biggest disconnect between systems and day-to-day operations when you start working with a CDFI?
Yeah, I would tell you that, and it sort of gets back to what Donna and Mark were talking about data. And we 7 years ago, when we launched the origination platform, we focused on, small business products, less than 500,000 loan amount, both conventional and SBA products. And what we found is the industry, and primarily back then, we were banks and credit unions, were doing a full financial spread on a $50,000 loan. And so we realized no one was leaning into the behavioral scores, FICO and SBSS, to use in a decisioning, and those have historically been black boxes. You get an absolute number back. We've grown custom that 720 is a good score, but we don't really know how it's calculated. So we ended up in even a deeper story. The background of our company, we have both a commercial business and a federal business. So when COVID hit, we actually got hired by the SBA in the summer of 2020. So think in our commercial origination, how the bank, CDFI faces the borrower. When COVID hit, we got hired by the SBA and Treasury, and they used our platform to effectively serve as the lender and face every bank, every lender in the country during COVID. So PPP, COVID idle, restaurants, OHA, big processed $1 trillion. But part of that exercise is the SBA came to us and said, we think SBSS is highly weighted with the owner's consumer score. Can you guys do it? What we found is that SBSS is about 90% weighted, the owner's consumer score. And why the industry wasn't leaning into a behavioral score. The great thing about the SBA is they release performance data. You can actually request that data. So the exercise we went on is we requested via FOIA 30 years of performance across 2.5 million loans. We then took FICO and SBSS plus 38 other elements to combine that data set to actually calculate a historical probability of default, loss given default, to arrive at an expected loss. So we're using that model to decision on small dollars for our clients. So we use the decisioning and origination. Then on our servicing platform, we're using it to monitor the portfolio. Lender gives thresholds, anything below X, I'm good with, anything above X, I want to do a full financial review. So you can use data and then analytics in a more efficient way around decisioning and monitoring. I would tell you the last thing too is you can then take every single industry broken out by the historical performance and allow your client-facing loan officers, relationship managers, focus their time. Live Oak Bank is a very high-performing bank that started in SBA lending, and all they did was the exact same thing. They took every industry that had 500 or more SBA loans, got the expected loss historically, and said, all right, we're going to focus on veterinarians. We're going to focus, and they just went down that chain. Well, that data set is public, and so I think as we talk about as we move forward, AI will only work if the data's good. And so there's opportunities to make sure data is centralized, that it is secure, but use that data across calling efforts, around decisioning, and around risk monitoring going forward.
Just to follow up, and whoever wants to answer this, when it comes to data, you all mentioned the criticality of data and how important it is to have the right systems in place and use it to decision and inform your work, and the ability to actually mine the data to look for insights as well. For the organizations in the room, I'm sure folks are at a different spectrum in terms of their sophistication, how they're actually utilizing the data. What would you say are like 2 or 3 things that folks should keep in mind when they're looking at their organization and their data systems on just an initial assessment?
Yeah. Rick, you want to lead with that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say first and foremost is to think about your data strategy and most critical elements. I think a lot of times, like, we advise people, like, when you're trying to build out better reporting, don't think about trying to build out everything that you may want. Pick some really high-value use cases, put some good processes in place to better manage that data, make sure that the terms you're using, the way you're measuring it, it's agreed upon across the organization. There's nothing worse than when people, 2 people show up with the same metric and they have a different value, and they, you spend a lot of time doing these things. So I think it really is about like taking the time and, to kind of really just think through it. What's most important that we measure, you put the infrastructure in place, and then you to continue to build out from there. One thing that we see people doing is kind of implementing, everyone when they think about BI thinks about the really pretty charts and dashboards, and that's a lot of the work that we like to do. But the one thing that's really valuable is to just give people access to the data set. And maybe they're going to want to query it and analyze it in Excel or something else. But if you give them a nice clean data set that aggregates data from many different places, people will start to become less afraid of the information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great, and it's a great lead-in into the next section in terms of we think about implementation. What does this look like operationally on a day-to-day? So Cary, from your experience supporting lenders at scale, what do you see when it comes to staffing and training challenges? What is the opportunity there, and what are ways that folks can actually build up their capacity around it when it comes to tech adoption?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been in a fortunate place in the fact that when we bring an origination and servicing platform, all the integrations are established. So it really does get to training, underwriting, processing, closing, and servicing. And we sit in a unique spot that we're just not a tech company. We actually have about 65 former bankers in a LSP team. We knew going in 7 or 8 years ago that banks didn't create talent like they did 20 years ago. I went through Compass Bank in Birmingham's training program, very in-depth over a couple of years, and we knew training had changed. And so as we looked across the landscape of our clients, what we saw is they need the ability to leverage talent in the back office as an option. It's an optional deal. And so we're in a unique spot in the fact that we have actual practitioners using the platform on behalf of our clients. So when we do train a new client, whether they're using our talent or not, we have practitioners in it day to day that do the training. And so Mark maybe have a little bit better insight of, I'm sort of spoiled in the fact that I have actual underwriters doing the training who use the tool. And it's not just here's the tech, but you may have some experience around that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would think, like when I think about making technology stick, I think a lot of organizations, when they want to make technical innovation, they think of it as a project. Like we're going to replace this system. Really, technology transformation should be continuous in an organization, which is a big culture shift. So I think the highest performing organizations typically are allocating, 20 to 30% of their IT spend on an annual basis towards new initiatives and innovation. And I think in this space, it's much more common that it's driven by a grant and then they'll go do a project versus looking at it more holistically. But I also think there's lots of, we think about like low-hanging fruit, like there's usually not enough emphasis on training in organizations. There's not enough emphasis on just peer-to-peer learning. We'd love to see more user groups in this space, really, like from a software vendor perspective. There's so many people using the same platforms, yet some of them struggle with things that we know other clients have already solved, so we try to connect them. But it would be great to see more user groups, because I think that will also help the technology stick within organizations. It's far more difficult to replace a platform than to get more incremental value out of it. And there's a lot of systems that are in place that people probably are not fully leveraging because they didn't do the continuous improvement once they initially got to the go live.
One of the things I've
Sandy,
go ahead.
just real quick.
Yeah.
I think we certainly saw that type of peer learning, the exchange of information that was really important with the Resilient Appalachian Data Initiative. We've got folks sitting right at this front table who can talk from personal experience because they've been part of a cohort. Mountain BizWorks, Partner Community Capital, other Western North Carolina CDFIs that were either located there or either doing business from outside the state. But that cohort really gave them the opportunity to come together on a regular basis to walk through the software, the systems, the platforms, to give fantastic feedback about what was working, what wasn't working, how they would actually be able to integrate that into their day-to-day operations. And it allowed Jesse Fripp, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for ACC, allowed him and his team to actually, in real time, go back and say, okay, let's modify. How can we make this better? How can we make it, a better improvement? So I think that cohort is really important because people get an opportunity to really say, listen, I don't know, or I'm struggling with this, or this is a challenge for me. How can it be better so that I actually will be able to adapt this and really be able to use it in not only in a productive way, but a sustainable way as well.
I love that. Part of the work that when we've been funding this work around the technology infrastructure, a key difference that I've seen personally with organizations that have been successful in this work is the focus on organizational change management is really critical because you're changing all the processes, you're changing how you go about doing your work, how you're interfacing with customers. So it's a really important piece to focus on as well. And then around that, if we're sticking to like what makes things successful, and I'm talking a little bit about some of the soft components, what have you all seen that makes a tech implementation successful? What else is required to actually make sure that it is successful within an organization?
Yeah, I would tell you that executive sponsorship, leadership, and then for us, across the origination and servicing workflow, is key buy-in. We're basically pulling in team members from the underwriting, from the processing, closing, and servicing, and across those team leads, as well as the executive sponsor, knowing that the organization is behind it, because it will be different, and we are seeing change, and there's new, and that's scary for a lot of people that have been doing things the same way for a long time. But having from a top down from the organization, buy-in and commitment to see this change, it has been really critical for us.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the organizational change management is absolutely critical. So we think of that, it starts before you even select a new platform. It's early and often, right, engage the team, right? There's a process people go through, it's called the Kubler-Ross change curve, and it's, anytime you're introduced with change, they go from, kind of like a period of like denial, and then they go through frustration, and eventually they get to acceptance. But it takes people time to go through that process, so the earlier you bring the people who are going to be impacted into the change, make them part of the decision, allow them to explore, kind of the quicker it allows people to get to the other side of that curve.
And you also have to have funding.
Yeah.
Money, dollar bills, because that is really important. I think we were really fortunate. You know, when we started, we were writing a lot of proposals, a lot of grant applications. People were turning us down. I was like, what are you talking about? Technology. We want you to lend. We want you to lend. And then we finally made a breakthrough, I think. Again, starting very small in Western North Carolina with the support of Dogwood Health Trust, and then later on with Truist Foundation, with JP Morgan Chase, as we moved through this continuum to end up with the support that we are now receiving from Mastercard, because as we moved through that continuum, we saw that there was an immediate need to support community lenders, CDFIs, on their, again, their day-to-day operations, their day-to-day business. But you all know, the world is big. We're dealing with some big deals, some big, hairy crises and priorities right now. And as we moved through the development of this data analytics hub, we said there's an opportunity here to also look at climate resilience, what's happening as it relates to climate change. There is this intersectionality between those crises and communities who want to build in a much more resilient way. How do we identify those communities? And how do we identify, even after there's been an incident, about what that impact looks like in the communities that have been affected by environmental crisis? And so, I mean, I think the beauty of this in the terrible tragedy in light of Hurricane Helene is that we were able to use that data in a very smart way that helped, I think, our CDFIs. They had technology as well, have done a tremendous job in looking at that data, analyzing it, and saying in a very structured, laser point way, this is where the help is needed, this is where we can better support, here are where the gaps are, here's where the damage is, that it may take years for that recovery to happen, but it's given us a lot more information than we would have had we not had both of those, both the systems as well as the community groups and the community organizations on the ground that also were working alongside us and looking at that and analyzing that data.
The point you made in terms of working with your team around this and also working with the organizations across the network, I think is a really important point to emphasize. As an intermediary, you're designing for the folks who you're actually serving, who are the actual other CDFIs as well. And then the end user is the business. And so designing with the end user, whether it's the business or whether it's another CDFI, is critically important to really center that. And the last point that I'd make that I've seen in terms of successful implementations has been also having board buy-in as well. That's really critical as well, and having that be part of your strategic roadmap. In your work, Donna, you were just talking and the way you go about doing it, it really is a shared services model. We've been hearing a lot about that in terms of, I've been hearing a lot about that here at the forum, and also the last couple months in terms of like, what are alternatives that folks can think about in terms of reducing costs overall. And we know technology implementation can be very expensive. It can also be inefficient if you're not ready to do that. But if there was gonna be, in a magical world, one system to sort of rule them all, if you will, Mark, what would you say from your consulting hat, right? If you could wave a magic wand and build just one shared system across the field, what would that look like and how would it help?
Yeah, so frankly, I may not be the best person to ask about, because I don't believe that it's possible to have one system, but I just think there's a reality, right? But I do believe there's plenty of opportunities to have some shared platforms. And I think one thing that I see that is like funder compliance. I think many of our clients are all trying to produce and custom create the same exact reports for the same funders, yet they're doing it within their individual organizations. So, you know, one thing that, you know, is definitely very top of mind for us is like, is there a way to centralize the collection of that data from different organizations to be able to kind of like mass produce some of the compliance reporting? And I think that would be a tremendous time savings for organizations if, you know, we're able to make that happen.
Great.
Donna, would that be a help?
Yes, it would.
You know, I'd also add to that in terms of the shared reporting. I think that's also something funders can also leverage. We've recently started sharing some of our own reporting that we receive from organizations we support with other funders, because why duplicate it if folks are going to be doing it? Because that also is very burdensome. So I think on both sides, when we're talking about infrastructure, there's opportunity for several parts of the sector and the areas that support it to also change as well. Cary, with the work that you've been doing around the work with your lending systems, what's one lesson from the model that you currently deploy where efficiency could be more broadly applied across the CDFI sector?
Yeah, I tell you, the one thing that we're really bullish on and working to finish, I think and it's when we partnered with Ventures back in February through that acquisition, over the previous 2 years, getting really close to Ellis Carr and the team at Momentous Capital CDC Small Business. We historically, you know, going back pre-COVID, were traditionally banks and credit unions. So I saw the fallout or lack of support of small business directly through my origination, and I continue to see that to some degree today. But I see the CDFI and the bank and the credit union being the perfect partners, because CDFIs don't want their deposits. That's all the bank and credit union really cares about, is deposit and kind of being in the loan business. So that's why when we talk about shared services, we've used the word marketplace around here this week. I really think there's a gigantic opportunity to systematically, because what was really missing in the origination business 7 years ago was a really good borrower self-service portal for origination, collecting documents, payments, which we sort of solved. And then in the borrower-facing application, we built a pre-qualification. So systematic, we know how to take a bank's credit profile and pre-qual and in decisioning and underwriting and lay it side by side with the CDFI. But that's why I'm really keen on sort of one platform, one efficiency, is the credit profiles match so well with the depository institution, but it has to be a seamless experience for that borrower coming through the bank or credit union to get to the CDFI. And so we spent a lot of time over the last 6 months to a year to work on that, and that's something I think we'll tackle. I hate to call it a marketplace, but it's really a systematic partnership where when CDFI has a relationship with bank and they're both on our platform, how they can work together.
Okay, last question. It'll be rapid, really quick. What's one feature or tool that could save a CDFI serious time and money? I'm not going to even say or. We'll start with Donna.
I'm going to repeat what's already been said. I really do believe very strongly in shared services. I've got on my desk right now a proposal. We've actually had a shared service agreement with Locust Bank since our inception. Locust Bank is a CDFI based in Virginia as well. And so they do all of our loan servicing, our accounting, our IT. And now we're looking at that IT piece because ACC has grown. Locust has grown as well and changed in terms of its own infrastructure. And we're really looking at ways in which we can be an even better match. But I'm happy that that shared service agreement is there in place and that all we need to do is modify it. If we were left alone to do it on our own, Sandy, it would have been a great challenge over these last 10 years for ACC not having that arrangement with Locust. So I'm a big proponent of the shared service agreement.
Mark?
Yeah, I think I'd kind of continue on the data piece of this, that centralized reporting infrastructure. I think organizations putting that in place, it's foundational to be able to get to kind of next level. And just by having it there, it really improves the organization's ability to measure, performance and impact and query data. I shared, earlier with this group, we recently ran a BI summit and we had banks and we had CDFIs. And I was shocked at the end of the summit when one of the banks said that the CDFIs are far more sophisticated in their treatment of data. Because usually we've kind of thought about that differently, but banks are much more standardized on what they collect and have standards on process. And I think that's the part that may be less mature. But I think CDFIs are thinking about data differently, and they need to. So investing in that data infrastructure is what I would say.
Cary?
Yeah, I'm probably a little conflicted to have the conversation about one technology platform, but I do think that, as I highlighted earlier, we ended up bringing practitioners on in that LSP to really ensure that the development of the product went well. As we moved across the country, what we realized is that the banking industry as a whole has creating talent. So we have professional talent that is optional. And I think the industry, and it's not just the CDFI industry, but both the bank and credit union industry, needs to look forward 10 or 15 years and understand how it's going to staff underwriting through servicing, because there is a supply and there's not enough creation of talent to sustain. So could the CDFI industry build its own shared service across the back office and professional talent? I think the answer is yes, and something that ought to be considered.
Great. And with that, we're going to close this panel. Donna, Mark, Cary, thank you so much for your insights. Really appreciate it. And that last panel of the session. And with that, I'm going to invite Sindhu to come to the stage and close the program. So thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Sandy, Mark, Cary, and Donna, for closing us out with such a timely and energizing conversation. Over the past 2.5 days, we've hosted 4 trainings, nearly 40 breakout and networking sessions, and 3 thought-provoking plenaries, all powered by the energy, insights, and experience of more than 100 speakers, and many more gallons of coffee. The breadth and depth we're able to offer an agenda doesn't just happen. It's because so many of you are generous with your time, knowledge, and willingness to share what's working and what's not to accelerate our collective impact. So thank you. I also want to recognize my incredible OFN colleagues and our event partners at Linder, every single one of whom played a role in making this forum happen, from content to logistics to registration. Thank you. If there's one thing this forum has reinforced, it's that uncertainty is a constant and the challenges we're facing are real. But so is our capacity to respond with creativity, shared purpose, and courage. When the work feels difficult, as let's be honest, that's most days ending in Y right now, we hope you remember the space and the people in it. Reach out, reconnect, and remember that you're part of a community that shows up for each other. This community is one of the most generous I know, and you are not in this work alone. The real impact of the forum happens in what we do next. It's easy to head home, return to the mountain of emails, and relegate the ideas to the bottom of the to-do list. So instead, follow up with someone you met. Take one idea from your notes and implement it and move it forward in the next 90 days. Review your loan and workout policies, call the AI voice agent, refine your marketing strategy, explore a new tech tool or platform. Let's turn insight into action and come back next year with stories of what's changed. Shortly after we close, you'll receive an invitation to complete the forum evaluation. Please take a few minutes to fill it out. We really do read every comment and use your feedback to shape future programming and events. We also hope to see you again soon, either virtually or in person, whether it's at one of our trainings, webinars, or at an annual conference, which will be this fall from October 21st to 23rd in Washington, D.C. If you're interested in presenting, the call for sessions is open through July 9th. And if you didn't make it to Terry Black's barbecue, or quite get your fill of Austin or tacos this time around, don't worry. We'll be right back here next year in Austin, Texas. So mark your calendars for June 10th to 12th, 2026. Thank you for your leadership, your ideas, your commitment, and for all that you do every day to expand economic opportunity in the communities we care most about. Safe travels, and see you soon.